when I was reading this again for this chapter kind of reminded me of Laurie's proposal to Joe. Because there we have...
You just can't take no for an answer.
Exactly. Like, he's injured, and Joe feels bad for him. And it's like this whole chapter is like, once again, Joe having these maternal feelings for him, like she is his little mother. And that's why Joe can't really see faults in Laurie's behavior, even when he is hurting her sister. As soon as he had gone, she wished she had been more forgiving, and when Meg and her mother went upstairs, she felt lonely and longed for Teddy. After resisting for some time, she yielded. The impulse, and armed with a book to return, went over to the big house. "Is Mr. Lawrence in?" asked Joe of a housemaid who was coming downstairs. "Yes, miss, but I don't believe he's seeable just yet." "Why not? Is he ill?" "La, no, miss. He's had a scene with Mr. Laurie, who is in one of his tantrums about something. It vexes the old gentleman, so I doesn't go nigh him." "Where is Laurie?" "Shut up in his room, and he won't answer though I've been a-tapping. I don't know what's to become of the dinner, for it's ready, and there's no one to eat it." "I'll go and see what the matter is. I'm not afraid of either of them." Up went Joe and knocked smartly on the door of Laurie's little study. "Stop that, or I'll open the door and make you," called out the young gentleman in a threatening tone.
Joe immediately knocked again. The door flew open, and in she bounced before Laurie could recover from his surprise. Joe, who knew how to manage him, assumed a contrite expression, and going artistically down upon her knees, said meekly, "Please forgive me for being so cross. I came to make it up, and can't go away till I have." "It's all right. Get up. Don't be a goose, Joe," was the cavalier reply to her petition. "Thank you, I will. Could I ask what's the matter? You don't look exactly easy in your mind." "I've been shaken, and I won't bear it," growled Laurie indignantly. "Who did it?" demanded Joe, grandfather. "If it had been anyone else, I'd have—" And the injured youth finished his sentence by an energetic gesture of the right arm. "That's nothing. I often shake you when you don't mind," said Joe soothingly. "Pooh, you're a girl, and it's fun. But I'll allow no man to shake me." "Why were you treated so?" "Just because I wouldn't say what your mother wanted me for. I promised not to tell, and of course I wasn't going to break my word." "Couldn't you satisfy your grandpa in another way?" "No, you would have the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I'd have told my part of the scrape, if I could, without bringing Meg in. As I couldn't, I held my tongue, bore the scolding till the old gentleman collared me. Then I got angry and bolted for fear I should forget myself. It wasn't nice, but he's sorry, I know, so go down and make up. I'll help you. Hanged if I do. I'm not going to be lectured and pummeled by everyone just for a bit of a frolic. I was sorry about Meg and begged pardon like mad, but I won't do it again when I wasn't in the wrong. He didn't know that. He ought to trust me and not act as if I was a baby. It's no use, Joe. He's got to learn that I'm able to take care of myself and don't need anyone's apron string to hold on by." It's so full of contradictions, isn't it? He says it was just a bit of a frolic, but then he claims he is sorry about Meg, and he behaves so, all this indignation all the way through this whole chapter. And yet, he's a man, he's not a baby, but he's having a tantrum.
Oh. But it's like, I wasn't in the wrong. How is that possible?
Yeah. Well, his grandfather doesn't know anything about the details of the situation, but he knows Laurie well enough to know that he was in the wrong about something.
Yes. This is not in any Little Woman movies, this chapter. But
No,
It is
kind of a feel.
Hello, friends. It is Niina from the Little Woman podcast. Just to let you all know that the Little Woman podcast episode transcripts are now available as books. You can find them as paperbacks and ebooks. They are wonderful reading for all the fans of Louisa May Alcott. You can find all the links from the description. And now, back to the show.
Yeah, well, they want to romanticize Joe and Laurie, which is pretty weird in my opinion. But like, this is in the BBC Little Woman series from 1970. And it's really disturbing because it really tries to portray that it was all Meg's fault, which it wasn't.
In the 70s version?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I haven't seen that version yet, but that's very 70s of them, isn't it?
I agree.
That is so ironic.
I mean, that version, it doesn't really do that well with Joe and Frederick, and not always with Joe and Laurie. I think it does really good job with Amy and Laurie, but like, this book was written in 1867, and then we have 1970s version, which kind of flips this upside down, and it's not good.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, I have to watch that one someday. I've definitely not seen it. Was it included in the one with, Maya Hawk? What was that one?
I don't think so. I don't think it was included.
I haven't seen that one. And that one was an actual miniseries, right?
Yes.
So there was time.
Mm-hmm. I think the Maya Hawke version, it really romanticizes Laurie, which is not really a surprise, but it's not very good if you want to do justice for the book.
No. Or allow people to mature.
Yes.
It's like they keep these versions, these film versions, keep both Joe and Laurie boxed in at 15 or 16, and just don't want them to grow up for some reason. Maybe because of that kind of more youthful exuberance that keeps the first half of the book kind of light and more fun than not.
It's problematic because if you don't see Laurie's growth, then you don't understand why he ends up with Amy. And it's such an important thing, in my opinion, that Louisa May Alcott included Laurie's this full growth process from a boy into a man. In the end of Little Woman, he actually apologizes to Joe that he was harassing her earlier.
He comes around. He does learn. He's the fifth sibling.
And it was something that I was actually discussing with another person for this podcast earlier, that the way Joe is written to be in this chapter is very different than Joe in Joe's Boys, where she's like in her 50s, 40s. And then there is this scene where Joe lectures these young men because they are harassing some of the female students. But if that Joe would have been like this 15-year-old Joe, then Joe would have probably said that it was actually this girl's fault that these guys were harassing her. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. I feel like Joe and Laurie are peers, and they have as much to learn, as the other. And they're so similar. This comes up throughout, particularly the first half of the book. It comes up a lot. Like Marmee mentions it to her, how similar Joe and Laurie are, and they talk about how, in some ways, that's why they have so much fun together. But in other ways, it's not always helpful, because they're just going to reinforce the worst parts of the other.
Yeah, it's that toxic masculinity.
Yes, that's what you mentioned before, which I think is important. to recognize in Joe as much as in Laurie.
Yes, and then when the second half of the book begins, Joe slowly starts to grow out of him.
Yeah, she grows before he does. And her refusal of his marriage proposal shows us that. And the way he responds to it shows how far behind her that he actually is as far as growth goes. And yet, that refusal is pivotal in his character arc, in his growth. It's because of that refusal that he grows as much as he does, I think.
I agree. Because he goes to Europe and then he's miserable there. And then I think that lecture that Amy gives to him, it really starts this process of him trying to find something from himself that he hadn't discovered yet.
Yes, plus I think that it's good for him to hear no now and then.
Yes. His grandfather tries to say no to him, but he really can't. I think it's because he lost his own son, and then he has Laurie left. So. But Pepperpots you are, sighed Joe. How do you mean to settle this affair? Well, he ought to beg pardon, and believe me when I say I can't tell him what the row's about. Bless you, he won't do that. I won't go down till he does. Now, Teddy, be sensible. Let it pass, and I'll explain what I can. You can stay here, so what's the use of being melodramatic? I don't intend to stay here long anyway. I'll slip off and take a journey somewhere, and when Grandpa misses me, he'll come round fast enough. I dare say, but you ought not to go and worry him. Don't preach. I'll go to Washington and see Brooke. It's gay there, and I'll enjoy myself after the troubles. What fun you'd have. I wish I could run off too, said Jo, forgetting her part of mentor in lively visions of martial life at the Capitol. Come on then, why not? You go and surprise your father, and I'll stir up old Brooke. It would be a glorious joke. Let's do it, Jo. We'll leave a letter saying we are all right and trot off at once. I've got money enough. It will do you good and be no harm as you go to your father.
For a moment, Jo looked as if she would agree, for wild as the plan was, it just suited her. She was tired of care and confinement, longed for change, and thoughts of her father blended temptingly with the novel charms of camps and hospitals, liberty and fun. Her eyes kindled as they turned wistfully toward the window, but they fell on the old house opposite, and she shook her head with sorrowful decision. If I was a boy, we'd run away together and have a capital time. But as I'm a miserable girl, I must be proper and stop at home. Don't tempt me, Teddy. It's a crazy plan. That's the fun of it, began Laurie, who had got a willful fit on him and was possessed to break out of bounds in some way. Hold your tongue, cried Jo, covering her ears. Prunes and prisms are my doom, and I may as well make up my mind to it. I came here to moralize, not to hear about things that make me skip to think of. I know Meg would wet blanket such a proposal, but I thought you had more spirit, began Laurie insinuatingly. Bad boy, be quiet. Sit down and think of your own sins. Don't go making me out to mine. If I get your grandpa to apologize for the shaking, will you give up running away? Asked Jo seriously. Yes, but you won't do it, answered Laurie, who wished to make up, but felt that his outraged dignity must be appeased first. If I can manage the young one, I can the old one, muttered Jo as she walked away, leaving Laurie bent over a railroad map with his head propped up on both hands.
This still sounds like she is trying to mother him.
Exactly.
This part where she says that if I was a boy, we'd run away together and have a capital time, but as I am a miserable girl, I must be proper and stop at home. There's something similar that she says in the chapter when she and Laurie meet and he has the sore throat. I think I wrote it here. Jo says, "Why don't you invite girls? Girls are quiet and like to play nurses." Like she doesn't have a very favorable view of her gender.
Even though she does like nursing.
Yes, and Louisa May Alcott was a trained nurse, so I think this is interesting.
She was, and that's one of the things I find fascinating, too, about this chapter, is that she was in Washington. Mm. She did go, she didn't have to imagine it or wish she were there as a young lady, but as a mature woman, she actually was there.
You have been reading hospital sketches.
Yes, I read it. It's pretty quick. It's not a long read. Well, I think I can see how, I know I can see now after having read it, why it's cited as the piece of writing where she found her voice. It's energetic, it's witty, it deals with serious topics, but it's just a quick, lively, enjoyable, thought-provoking read. Just like Little Women is.
I will add it to my long reading list. Wasn't that
It'll be one of your quicker ones.
Yeah.